and I would really appreciate it if you would stop Rob Taylor from blathering on and on.
Opinions expressed by talk show hosts, callers, or guests on the Rob Taylor Report do not necessarily represent the opinions of the hosting platform, subsidiaries, sponsors, or possibly anyone else on the planet or the known universe. From the tinfoil and lead-lined broadcast bunker on the beautiful southern coast of Oregon, it's the Rob Taylor Report. So strap yourself in. Your weekly political therapy session is about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, the nearly famous Rob Taylor.
Joining me, I've got a really good show. I've got a great candidate coming on. We're going to be talking about the campaign for U.S. Congress. I mean, we've got some really lousy congressmen. I mean, they're the best congressmen that New York could buy. I mean, Merkley and Wyden, they represent our senators. I shouldn't say congressmen, our senators. And so, yeah, there are some really bad people that we need to get rid of and get some new people in Washington, D.C. to represent Oregon. And we're going to be talking about that. I do have to say that we're not playing Where's 3H Tree Service. They already got a winner. They got a winner. They're doing a kick-ass job over there. Where's 3H Tree Service is something we usually play on the show for people who live in Coos County. And today, they already got a winner. They started early this morning, and somebody found out where they were working at. And so we got a winner for Where's 3H Tree Service. Second thing I've got to announce is that we are a new improved county. We've got a brand new Republican Party here in Coos County. We've got an all new leadership except for, say, 2 people. And so we're doing a lot of good things here. And I hope all of you are willing to join us for the ride. And I know there's some really special people who are going to be viewing the show today. So I know you guys are out there watching this, and we may be talking about a few of you with the candidate that I'm going to be having on as a guest. And if you don't know who this gentleman is, you need to find out who this gentleman is, because he's running against Merkley and he's in the primary. He's got 3 other candidates who are running against him. And his name is Russell McAlmond, running for U.S. Is it U.S. House or U.S. Senate? It's U.S. Senate, right?
It's the U.S. Senate. That's correct.
Yeah, I thought so. I don't know why.
My site actually mentions McAlmond for Congress.org, but it's a U.S. Senate running, definitely against Jeff Merkley, and I think a lot of Republicans around the state of Oregon are very, very excited about having a candidate who actually has the ability and the opportunity, really, to beat Jeff Merkley in November. In fact, we were talking the other day. We were up at the Willamette Week up in Portland, and I mentioned to them that there were 2 other candidates that are up there with me, Joe Ray Perkins, who I'd be happy to talk about, and David Smith, who I'd also be happy to talk about. But we were up there talking with the Willamette Week, and so they asked me about my U.S. Senate run and why I was running, because, what I told them was that really I believe I'm the only Republican candidate running that can beat Jeff Merkley in November, and I really sincerely believe that.
Well, we do know that Joe Ray has already tried it and has unfortunately failed
multiple times.
And a valiant effort, but unfortunately she has failed. Now we've got several people in the primary, so you're not running by yourself. So I think you have to kind of, and this is where you really got it, Russ. You don't mind if I call you Russ, right?
No, not at all.
Okay, and I apologize because I used Russell McAlmond, I used Russ McAlmond instead of Russell on the title of the show, and then I thought, I hope it doesn't upset him because you know,
No, not at all.
so, you are a military man, and that's something that we don't see a lot of in politics anymore. People who have gone out, sacrificed, who've put their life on the line, who've actually signed the papers, who said we're giving permission for the U.S. government to do pretty much whatever they want to us, send us anywhere in the world, and risk our lives to protect the freedoms that you just talked about in our Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution as well. And one of the things that is lacking, I see in a lot of other candidates, is that they don't have that dedication to service. In fact, David Brock Smith, other than the few businesses that he was lucky enough that his parents provided for him, and Joe Ray Perkins does have some business experience, neither one of them, I don't think, has ever been in the military.
No, I'm the only veteran that's running for the U.S. Senate as a Republican. And I do think it gives me an advantage over Merkley as well. But it also gives me an advantage over the other people who are running against me in the U.S. Senate race with Republicans. And the advantage is that, first of all, that I understand, as a veteran, I understand veterans' issues. There are thousands of veterans in Oregon that are not being represented by a person like Jeff Merkley. And there's thousands of veterans in Oregon who are not going to be represented by Joe Ray Perkins or David Smith either, because neither one of them have served, neither one of them have the intimate knowledge that all veterans have about what it is to risk your life for your country and to serve honorably in the U.S. military.
Right.
So I do think it's a very, very important part of my qualifications, but it's also one of the things that gives me an advantage over Merkley in November that the other candidates running for the U.S. Senate do not have. So I was in the Marines for U.S. Marines for 3 years of active duty. I had a 15-month overseas deployment. I have disabilities that I have from my military service that have affected me my entire life. And so it's one of the costs that all veterans know about. And that is that when you sign up to serve your country, the kind of training, the kind of experiences that you go through can have an impact on you, on your health for the rest of your life. And so that's exactly what has happened. So it also, for myself, it gave me, I kind of fell behind my peers at the time because I went in the Marine Corps when I was 18 years of age. So it was a very young age. And most of my peers at that time, only about 1% of the country actually serves in the military, but most of my peers at that time went to college and kind of had a head start. I went in the Marine Corps. In fact, I took some classes at Harvard University as my career after being in the Marine Corps. And the Harvard Crimson had wrote an article about myself coming back into the educational field or academia after my Marine Corps experiences, and it was the title of the article was "A Marine at Harvard," and it was actually I was taking online classes at Harvard University. And one of the things I wrote about at that time, which was I think pretty interesting, was the idea of thinking about who is getting the better education, an 18-year-old spending 3 years in the Marine Corps, being sent overseas for 15 months and going through all that experience with boots on the ground, actually being in the military, or the person who went directly to Harvard University and spent their 4 years at Harvard. So who really is getting the better education? It's an interesting idea because from my perspective, and I've got formal education, in fact, I'm more educated than anybody else running for the U.S. Senate in Oregon. I have four degrees. I have a fifth degree that I'll be getting here in about a month or so. And but my education, my experience of being in the Marine Corps put me at a very, very visceral level of what it means to be an American patriot, what it means to be a young man risking their life for their country, that anybody going directly onto college just would never ever have that experience. And it's a very grounding experience, Rob. It's something that and all veterans know this. It's something that civilians can't understand, but it's a very grounding experience into our love of country and what grounds us to our country and what makes us want to make the country even better. And so part of my reason for running for the United States Senate in Oregon is to also make the country better. And a person like Jeff Merkley, of course, in my opinion, makes the country worse, not better.
And a lot of that happens is because Merkley and Wyden, they suffer this horrible, horrible disease called affluenza. They've been very affluent all their life. They've had more privilege than most of us out here have ever had the luxury of enjoying. And they live in a world that I'm not privy to, and they are not living in my world and really can relate to me. You are someone who relates to what we're doing out here on the ground. I've talked to Merkley, I've talked to Wyden in even in closed door set in meetings where it was just one-on-one. And I've talked to these guys, and I can tell you right now, they don't have a clue. They have no idea what the average working person goes through in a week. And it's sad, it's depressing that these are the guys who we pick for our leaders. When I did a lot of hiring and firing, I worked for a huge optical warehouse where, we made 700-800 pairs of glasses a day. I had to hire and fire a lot of different opticians. And when I would have college kids come in compared to veterans coming in, and I've hired a lot of both, I can tell you right now, I always looked at the veteran or the college kid with a lot more skepticism, because I always look at the college kids the same way I look at Merkley, someone who suffers affluenza. Whereas I look at the kid who had to go and sign on the dotted line to go to college, number one. Number two, he actually has, usually people who sign up and take that kind of sacrifice, they have a love of country that's proven in the act of just signing up to defend the country. That's something that you don't have in American hating college kids. And going back to the 80s, I remember these American hating college kids who thought they knew everything. And yet you would get some young serviceman in there who was willing and eager to learn and was very confident in what they were doing, which was completely different than what you see at the college. So I could have testified to that paper. You're absolutely right.
Yes, it's a very, very different experience. Like I said, a very grounding experience, and it's something civilians will never understand. But it also, I think, puts you down at that level of the average American patriot. And my experience after the Marine Corps also has kind of grounded me into that life experience as well. And one of the benefits, of course, being a little bit older, is the fact that you do have a lot of life experience. But life experience creates wisdom. And wisdom, Plato wrote about this when he wrote about the Republic and politics in the Republic. And he wanted senior politicians and leaders to be people who reached a certain age, because he knew that life experience gave them at least some wisdom. And of course, Plato also wanted philosophers to be kings. But he truly believed that wisdom is what creates good political leaders, community leaders. And so in that wisdom, what Plato suggested is going through these different phases of life. And the part that you were talking about where you have politicians who have not gone through that building phase of life. So I built my business from the ground up. I had zero money at the start of my business, and I formed a registered investment advisory practice in Portland, Oregon. It was very successful. I managed millions of dollars for individuals, and it was a very, very good business. I had that for nearly 20 years. I went into that business after coming out of the banking world. And so I built the business from the ground up. I hired employees, I fired employees. I did all the different things that any small business owner would have to do. And I understand that experience intimately, like you do, and like other people who have had to build themselves up from the ground. And the thing about getting into business, as you know, is that there's no safety net underneath that. So, you get into business, you're taking a risk, just like I risked my life going in the Marine Corps. I risked my financial future going into this business. Well, fortunately, it worked out for me. But it's the understanding of what that is, and entrepreneurship is part of the American spirit. We look at somebody like Elon Musk, and we can see that the American dream is still there. But it's that entrepreneurship is part of the American spirit. And when you have politicians like Wyden and Merkley who don't understand what it's like to build a business from the ground up, don't understand what it's like to serve in the military, don't understand what it's like to have these life experiences, and they go into the Senate with this sheltered life that they have, they don't really understand what American life is all about. I mean, and so how are they going to be able to pass policies and make judgments about issues, tax policies and different kinds of things, when they really don't even understand what the average American worker goes through on a day-to-day basis? And I was in business for 30 to 40, over 30 years, both on the corporate banking side as well as my own registered investment advisory practice. So I understand both from a corporate level as well as from a small business level what the impact of government policies are. But with people like Wyden and Merkley, they just don't have a clue. And frankly, it shows, because look at the kind of responses that they have in the offices that they have. I mean, the U.S. Senate is a class 2 governmental office. Class 1 is the presidency. The U.S. Senate is class 2. And you have somebody like Merkley going around calling all ICE officers fascists. I mean, that's just crazy.
That's insulting. He
doesn't
know
even understand
every
what it is.
individual.
He doesn't even understand what it is to be an ICE officer. ICE officers are they're risking their lives as well, just like I risked my life as a Marine. And he doesn't understand any of that. He doesn't know about it. And yet he's making that kind of a judgment based, really, in my opinion, Merkley's entire political agenda right now in 2026 is basically based on hatred of Trump. And that's really the reason why he's doing that.
Trump derangement syndrome seems to be campaign issue number one, and that's because they lose on every other issue. I think today, and because I've been gearing up for a lot of different things, I've been kind of back and forth in the news. I thought I saw that they actually passed an immigration bill that if anyone commits a felony against America will be immediately deported. And I'm thinking, why wasn't this a law before?
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, I guess they just passed that today. It's going to allow the deportation of anybody that commits fraud against the U.S. government. And I think I would have voted for it. Absolutely. Yep. I would have voted for the SAVE Act as well. I would have voted to open up the government that Merkley didn't vote for a long time. And when the interesting thing about Merkley's vote on opening back up the government was that he basically said that it was the Republicans. He blamed the Republicans for keeping the government shut down late last year. And it was actually, he was voting every day to make sure that the government did not open back up again. So, I mean, that's just an outright lie. And, in politics, really, I don't understand any reason for a politician to lie to their constituents. I really don't understand that. I was in a business, the registered investment advisory business, where honesty and integrity and ethics were paramount. Right. My business would never have been successful, and I wouldn't have had all the clients that I had and the millions of dollars I invested for them without having good ethics. I was never sued in business. I never had one written client complaint from any client while I was in business. And the reason for that, Rob, is because, I took the position that honesty is the best policy, that you've got to be honest with your clients. You've got to be honest with everybody, I take the same position running as a United States Senator, that I will never, and I would say this on your show, that I will never lie to anybody, to any Oregonian, uh, in order to try to cover up what I'm doing in the U.S. Senate, or in order to try to be a partisan in the U.S. Senate. I just simply won't do that.
That's important. Transparency. And we see that on every level is a problem, all the way from the lowly precinct committee person in a major party, all the way up to the president. We see that all the time, where people think that they have to lie because if people knew the dirty truth of politics, because politics is dirty. You're always trying to negotiate without compromising too much of your soul. And you don't want those early negotiations out, because people will go, well, look what you're doing, and then you have to explain for it. So you have to be upfront to people. This is why I'm negotiating this, and I'm willing to give up something to get something, but I'm not willing to compromise on certain things. There are certain values I won't compromise on, is what I'd like to hear politicians say. The Second Amendment is one of those things. To me, there is no compromise on the Second Amendment, and I would like to hear, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, always have been. When I was in the Marine Corps, one of the things I was trained to do is to be a weapons instructor, so I actually taught the Marines how to shoot. I'm very comfortable around weapons. And the interesting thing about that was that I'd never fired a high-powered rifle ever before I got into the Marine Corps. They taught me how to do it. And I ended up becoming the highest shooter on the range at one particular event, and so they made me a weapons instructor. So
Yeah.
At least they taught me the right way to do it anyway. So, and I've been a long time NRA member, and I'm also right now a certified NRA handgun instructor. So I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment. I believe that our right is a constitutional right that should not be infringed on. And one of the things I'd like to think about to do at the federal level is to be able to get some gun laws passed at the federal level that actually reinforce our gun rights at the state level. So in other words, federal law actually supersedes state law. So if you can get a gun right, like say magazine size. So if you can get magazine size federally protected at the federal level with a federal law, then Oregon can't come along and try to tell you can only have 10 bullets in a magazine, because that'd be violating federal law, and federal law supersedes state law. So some of those concealed weapon or concealed carry is another thing I think that some people have been advocating for. And that's the idea of that you have a federal law that protects your right to have concealed carry around the country. And that would supersede any kind of the states trying to give you permits on whether or not you can or you cannot do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I never understood why. I don't know. I just read the Second Amendment, that shall not be infringed. And then I look at Oregon's gun laws and I go, something's just not quite right here. But then you look at Oregon's version of the Second Amendment, and it's actually more defensive of your right to own and bear arms. And yet here in Oregon, they have found ways to tie up the constitutionality of it.
Well, the Democrats in Oregon are constantly coming up with new gun laws over and over and over again, and their encroachments on, or you might say, using the language, they're infringements on a constitutional right. Now, this is not just a normal everyday right. It's a constitutional right. It's built into the Constitution,
right?
And we are a constitutional nation. But the Democrats just don't accept that, and they simply want to keep passing more and more and more gun laws. And frankly, I've talked to a lot of Democrats. I lived in Portland for over 40 years or so, and I know that I talked to a lot of these people up there, and a lot of them were clients of mine. And part of what that is all about is not so much just encroaching on your gun rights. They don't want you to have the Second Amendment at all.
Right.
And so that seems to be the ultimate aim of a lot of these laws, is to keep whittling away at this right until it becomes, negligible. I mean, there's nothing there any longer. So,
Well, and that goes
and
back
that's
to
just simply not right, and it violates the
Right.
Constitution.
Right, and it's part of them pushing collectivism. We need you to be protected by the collective, not be able to protect yourself, because then you'll be able to protect yourself from the collective. That's a
Right.
problem. So
No.
yeah, there's reasons why they want this, and I hear people all the time, well, we got police, we're secure, don't we live in great areas? Well, I've lived in the inner cities. I lived in a barrio in Albuquerque, and believe me, there were damn good reasons why you had a gun and
Absolutely.
defend it yourself.
Yeah.
It's,
I might address something that one of your listeners just put up on the screen, but the idea that they would vote for anybody over other than Merkley. And here's the issue with that, and of course Smith is one of them that's running also for the U.S. Senate. Republicans need to understand what the primaries are all about. And the primaries are not to pick somebody who's like you, who shares the same religion that you do, or all these different things. Republican primaries in the state of Oregon are for selecting the one Republican that has a real opportunity to actually defeat Jeff Merkley in November. So and that's the purpose of the primary. It's not who's going to be the most hardcore, who's going to be the softest, who's going to be whatever. It's the Republican who can actually defeat Merkley in November. That's the person you should vote for. And when it comes to, like I said, I was up at Willamette Week with the interview with both Joe Ray Perkins and David Smith. And Smith, so we were asked about why we were running for the U.S. Senate. What was our motivation? And my motivation was to defeat Merkley. Smith's motivation when he had his time to talk, and I was right there in person, so this is a direct firsthand experience of listening to him. He talked about all the different committees he was on, all the different things he's involved in, all the different, he even bragged about getting a call from Governor Kotek while we were there in the Willamette Week offices, and how Kotek had wanted him to do something. And I think he's trying to impress the Willamette Week people that he has this good working relationship with Tina Kotek so that they might endorse him for the Republican primary. And but he described his kind of career politician ideas of being in the Oregon legislature. That's why he was running, because he felt that he's qualified to do that with that kind of a background. And one of the first thoughts I had about that was, well, Jeff Merkley has a much more powerful and much more extensive legislative experience than David Smith does. I mean, so if David Smith might be using this to try to win the primary, but when he gets to the November election, what is he going to do? He's going to say, well, I'm at Oregon State Legislature, so I work with Tina Kotek. And Merkley will say, well, I work for Tina Kotek too, but I have 3 terms as a U.S. Senator, more than you do in legislative experience. So guess who wins?
right.
Merkley wins because hands down, he's got more experience than Smith does. So
and things that you don't really want to have experience in, because it's nothing but politicking and bureaucracy. That's their experience, is government bureaucracy, and more government bureaucracy.
Yeah.
I've got news for you. David Brock Smith is watching this right now. I was having a back and forth with him on Facebook, and he normally watches this show because we're in his area, and he knows what we just did with the Republican Party. We got rid of a lot of his supporters, and we put in other people I would say most of them are probably Joe Ray Perkins, and I think that's because they don't really know you, because now you've been, because of you being on Facebook the way you've been on lately, a lot of our people are now starting to gravitate towards you. And I just hope that it has some effect before the election. But I want you to know your competition is watching the show.
Well, that's perfectly fine because everything that I said was exactly true. And then again, that's the thing. I'm not going to lie about anybody. Now, David Smith has lied about me. He actually we were out of the Pendleton candidate forum out there, and I mentioned when we were talking about ourselves as candidates, I mentioned that I'm the most educated Republican candidate running for the U.S. Senate, and then Smith gets up and he actually makes the claim that he's more educated than I am, which is not true at all. And then it was quoted in the Eastern Oregon newspaper that he had said that he was more educated than I was. So I mean, that's one of those kind of lies. When somebody lies like that to try to dilute one of your qualities. So my quality as a candidate is the fact that I am the most educated. I'm more educated than Jeff Merkley. And yet when he tries to break that down in front of an audience of Republicans, and he's saying something like that, it reminds me of a used car salesman type person who basically will say anything to make the sale, even if it's not honest. And so I got a very bad feeling about David Smith being with him there in person on that stage when he was turning around and looking at me and said that he's actually more educated than I am. And so, that kind of dishonesty from a political candidate is, in my opinion, really should be disqualifying because, I want Republican U.S. Senate candidates, well, all Republican candidates, to be honest and ethical people. And if they're not honest and ethical people, then that's going to be a problem for the Republican Party. It's also going to be a problem for the representation for the Republican Party.
You're damn right it is. And then what's the worst part is that if we get people like that into office, then we either have a choice. We either have to defend them no matter how bad they are, or we eventually have to cut those ties. So why even bother putting someone in office who you are already questioning their integrity? I've seen your post and all this stuff. I don't really know much about you, but I haven't heard anything bad about you. Joe Ray, I've known for 15 years. I've, one way or the other, it's, we're friends and I like her. But the thing is that I haven't heard anything bad about her as far as anything that would be, in my opinion, is criminal. I mean, David violating him taking money or doing a commercial that he knew was not a PSA, was actually a campaign commercial. I mean, when you see people like that, you got to ask, why would you put them in positions of higher power when they're already committing these types of offenses? So that's what I don't understand about Republicans. We're willing to make that compromise a lot of times. And if you don't, your fellow Republicans will say, well, you have to make that compromise for the greater good, which I don't believe exists. There is no greater good.
No, I don't think you ever compromise your ethics. There's no reason to compromise your ethics. And when people do it in order to get a short-term gain, try to get an advantage on somebody else, when they're actually willing to give up their own personal integrity in order to try to get a short-term gain on somebody, that's just not a good reflection of character. And character matters.
Yeah,
it really matters. When Jo Rae Perkins was asked about why she was running, and I'm sure you've heard this before, and I'm sure many Republicans have heard this before also in Oregon because of past elections, but when she was asked by Willamette Week why she was running against Jeff Merkley, she said because God called her to run. And So my thoughts about this, and I've actually written about this on my campaign site, the Willamette Week interview, where I talk about the three of us being up there. I mean, we're the only three that really have any chance of getting the nomination, but the three of us being up there in Portland. And the problem I have with Jo Ray Perkins' comment in what her description of the reason why she's running against Jeff Merkley is because she's used that same thing that God called her on all these other elections as well. And in my opinion, there's several things wrong with that. One, first of all, I believe in God, but I would, if I had a call from God to do anything, frankly, I'd keep it to myself and I'd just go out and do it. So the fact that she does this, in fact, when I was up at Pendleton, Jo Ray Perkins made the exact same thing. I was called from God to do this. I had an audible calling from God to do this. I don't believe any believer needs to be getting up on public stage in a political setting where she's actually competing against other believers and say that somehow she has divine sanction for being there.
Right.
I just, that's more political manipulation than it is something spiritual, in my opinion. But secondly, she didn't say that she's there to defeat Jeff Merkley. She said she was there because God wanted her to run, and she's a perennial runner. She gets into all these different elections and loses every time, but she gets into all these different elections. So, I think you have to have a candidate that's going to actually want to defeat Jeff Merkley and has the ability to defeat Jeff Merkley if you're going to run a Republican, against Jeff Merkley. You do not run a candidate against Jeff Merkley that says, God told me to run in political campaigns, because that's the goal. Her goal is completed just by running.
Right.
I mean, she's finished her goal. It's done. It's over with. My goal is not completed by running. My goal is completed by defeating Jeff Merkley. And so that's a big difference between Jo Ray Perkins and myself.
Yeah, but it's undercutting what she says, because if she doesn't win, what do we say? Oh, well, I guess God just was calling you out for no good reason, because that's what, like you said, that's really what she should be saying, that God has called me because I believe I can defeat Jeff Merkley, not I believe I can win the primary. And then if she doesn't defeat Merkley, that's really a kind of a besmirchment to God, isn't it?
Well, she's already ran against Merkley once before using the same thing, that God called her to do it. Now, she's used the God called thing at least in two other elections in the U.S. Senate race. She did it with Merkley and she did it with Wyden. And she had multiple candidates in those U.S. Republican primaries, U.S. Senate Republican primaries. And she gets about 20 to 30% of Republicans. And I think some of these are believers who actually think she has some kind of divine sanction to be doing this, who will vote for her every single time. Well, that 20 to 30% is more than some of the others that we have.
Right.
Are able to get if you have a divided election where the vote is split between Republicans. And so she's had the nomination twice based on that same concept, a political concept of being able to say, well, God called me to run. Okay, so then she goes against Merkley. God called her to run, which she accomplished by getting the nomination, right, or by at least even entering the race. And then she goes against Merkley and she loses by 18 points. And then she goes against Wyden when she gets the nomination a couple of years after that, and she loses by 15 points. So God obviously is not calling her to win elections. God must be calling her just to run. Right. And frankly, I don't think that's a very good reason to nominate somebody. I think the reason to nominate somebody, in my opinion, would be more valid, would be to say, God called me to beat Jeff Merkley, like you mentioned.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that would, to me, that would be a much more of a qualifier than, oh, he's just telling me to run. Well, I think God is pretty goal-minded in his thinking. If he's anything like most of us, he's goal and minded in that. But my question is to you: is I do hear this a lot about you in the post, and I haven't a clue why they say this, but I would love to hear your explanation. I think I can get an idea of why they're saying it because it's a controversy amongst Republicans. As a veteran, I understand your understanding of being in the military, your understanding of being in service and being in action. I've never been in the military, but yet I'm someone who I just despise endless wars. I despise useless wars. And I think sometimes this country does things that it shouldn't be doing. It's not America first, but they have called you Israel first. And I want you to hit that for me.
Yeah, there are some people out there that have said that, and it's, you know, and I really do think it's quite hateful. And because the fact that I'm a U.S. Marine veteran that served 3 years, and I've challenged some of these people, and I've said, "Did you ever serve in the military?" And of course, they never
Right.
have.
Right.
And so I can't be an Israel firster if I risked my life for my
Good
country, for
point.
America. I mean, just the fact that I risked my life for America, my young life from 18 to 21, where I could have been killed, and cannot possibly make me another country first before America. I never
Right.
risked my life for Israel. So why would the idea that, so where that comes from is that I support Israel. I'm a strong supporter of Israel. And 80 to 90% of Republicans are strong supporters of Israel. And Trump is a strong supporter of Israel.
Okay,
And
before
some
you go
of,
any further, say why you're a supporter of Israel. Is it because they're the chosen people under God? Is it because they're one of the only democracies in the Middle East? What's your reasoning for that? Just go ahead and hit that first.
my reasoning for being a strong supporter of Israel is because of they're the only democracy in the Middle East. They share our values, and they've been an incredible ally for the United States as well. And Israel fights its wars with its own people. It doesn't ask us to do it for them, So the United States has sent Americans out to fight wars in Vietnam and all these different countries, and and American lives have been lost in those wars. Europe has asked us to send our soldiers over there, our people over there to die in their wars. But Israel doesn't ask Americans to die for Israel. And so they ask for financial aid, they ask for military cooperation, but they're not asking for American boots on the ground, which I would understand to be actually a very good thing because we're not doing that. So my support for Israel is because they're a democracy, they share our values, they're an ally, uh, and uh, and they're the only one in the Middle East. Whereas a lot of the Middle East actually hates America, would like to destroy America,
Yeah.
and a lot of them share a different religion that really hates people who are Christians, and the majority of people in the United States are Christians. So of course, I think it's very easy to be pro-Israel, and that's the reason why 80 to 90% of Republicans in America are pro-Israel.
Right.
So
But I just don't what it is that people see what's happening, the action in Iran, and they think that Trump is being led by Netanyahu and doing their dirty work, which I don't believe it's that way. I believe Trump is leading Netanyahu around because, as Trump said, they just
yeah,
don't know what the F they're doing. And he's the one running the show, in my personal opinion. But there are people who think that, and I've got friends like this. It's the Jews. Everything's the Jews. And I've got friends, I swear it. It's like I've got a good friend. She was at the headquarters yesterday. Her name is Dahlia. She's Jewish, and I always go, how are you Jewish and not in the cabal? You live in a trailer in a little area. How is it you're not part of the big Jewish cabal? And she laughs and laughs, and we joke about it because they take a lot of crap for things that I don't think that they should be blamed for. And I think it's a real sick bias that goes back. I don't know where it goes back. I guess there's several different areas, but do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, some of it is coming from anti-Semitism. So part of this has to do with this whole idea of the Declaration of Independence and John Locke's philosophy about the Declaration of Independence, where it says that we have, John Locke used the words of life, liberty, and property, actually is what he said. And Jefferson changed it to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But the key component to that phrase, which is a founding value of the United States, and of course it goes on to say unalienable rights as well, but these rights are individual rights, individual, not collective rights, not group rights, or individual rights. And the United States of America was the only country ever founded in the history of the world on individual rights in equality, because it also says we are all created equal. So you take those concepts of being created equal, but also all unique in the ability of having our own individual rights, and you come up with something, a human relational philosophy that basically says, and I've actually written a book about this, it's called Ethical Individualism, but what it does is it tries to systematically explain what those words mean and what they mean in America. So the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president. Guess what his platform was? His platform was human rights. He said, we are a human rights party. We are the best. We have the best history of human rights ever since the Civil War. We passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And you will find that it's this Republican idea that we share, and the Democrats don't, but because they were the pro-slavery party. But this Republican idea that we honor individual rights, not collective rights. So transgender rights and all those kind of things are all different. Those are group rights. And I've had people comment, well, what about transgender rights? Well, those aren't human rights. Those are group rights. They may be civil rights. So we need to come back to the Republicans understanding that we are a human rights party. We need to reclaim that title, I believe. Oregon Republican Party needs to get out there and tell people, hey, we're the human rights party, because this is really where we get beat up on all the time by the Democrats. Right. And Republicans don't respond to it well because they don't understand that this is really one of the best parts of our party is the fact that we're a human rights party.
And yet you see the establishment candidates, everything you just said is something they would never speak about in a public meeting. They never go back to it's individualism over collectivism. They never delineate between why their policy is better because it's conducive to the individual, not to some group. And it's not there for groupthink. It's, it should be for everyone equally, not creating equity for everyone equally.
Well, and they're opposed to DEI, and they should be. You mentioned that David Smith has voted for DEI funding. Obviously, if any Republican who's voting for DEI funding does not understand that DEI is collectivism, and you are supporting collectivism, which is not a Republican value. Individualism is a Republican value, not collectivism. So this idea that you're doing that is going to be very, very problematic for any Republican, because you're denying Republican values. You're
Right.
not really being a good Republican from that perspective because you're siding with the Democrats. Democrats have always been into collectivism, which is why they were into racism. And it's why they're into DEI as well, because DEI is a collectivist human relation philosophy. It came from Europe. It did not come from America. It's not based on American founding values. It actually came
Right.
from Europe. But all this comes into play when you start talking about Jews and anti-Semitism. So any comment about the Jewish people as a people and any blame or guilt or assignment of value to the Jewish people as a people is anti-Semitic. And the reason why it's the same thing as racism.
Right.
So any comment about all black people being this, that, or to blame for this, that, or whatever, anytime you say that about all black people, it's racist. It's a group judgment. We don't, as Republicans, we don't judge people by group. We shouldn't. Some people do, but we should. So it's a group judgment. It's group judgmentalism. I wrote a book about this, about the harm of group judgmentalism, because group judgmentalism is what caused the Holocaust.
Right.
So the Nazis in Germany thought all Jews were bad too, and thought all Jews were to blame for this and all Jews were to blame for that. And where did that end up? Because whenever you make a group judgment about human beings, you are dehumanizing them. You're on the first step of dehumanizing them. And so there's three different D's that go along with this group judgmentalism. The first D is dehumanization. You're denying the individuality of that human being when you put them in a group and you judge them. There's de-individuation, which is now you're making them into something separate, which is again the denial of individuality. But then that also can lead to destruction, and destruction really is the murder and the killing and destroying those people because they've been demonized, dehumanized, and now they're less human than anybody else. Therefore, we have the right to kill them. It's not really murder if we kill people who are dehumanized.
And that's the problem that we're having with the left, is that they're dehumanizing Republicans. You went back to Merkley dehumanizing the ICE agents, which, by the way, I have met ICE agents who do not like Trump and do not like his policy. So when Merkley craps over a whole group of people, he's crapping over people who might be voting for Merkley. And so that's the problem. Anytime you attack a whole group of people, I've learned in the radio show, you try to insult as the smallest group possible. You know, when we make fun of cities here, it's fun of powers because, you know, everyone's related in powers. And so we know that we want to make fun of the smallest city because you don't want a huge group of people coming at you. And by the way, for all the people in powers, I love you. You know that. And so, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things where it's like Pollock jokes, and Pollock jokes weren't nearly as ominous. You know, the N-word was probably in that where you put every black person into the N-word category. Well, Pollock's for many years, you know, probably not so much these days, was put into a group. And that, like you said, you're demonizing a whole bunch of individuals who are good people because they just happen to be Jewish or in ICE.
Well, the left is very much into this, and the left has been getting a lot more into anti-Semitism than the right has been. You know, the college campus riots and all those kind of things were very anti-Semitic, and they've continued to be anti-Semitic. In fact, Alan Dershowitz, who's the Harvard law professor, actually left the Democratic Party and became a Republican because of the anti-Semitism. He said that the Democratic Party is the most anti-Semitic party ever in the history of the country, and he's right about that. But you are seeing some of that slop over into the Republican Party, and when you have people in the Republican Party who are saying the Jews are blamed for this, or Netanyahu is controlling Trump, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody controls Trump.
No.
Trump is probably one of the most willful people I've ever seen in American politics, and there's no way that anybody decides what he's going to do. But that is another anti-Semitic trope that's been around for centuries, that Jews control this or Jews control
Yep.
that. That's been around for many years. It also is one of the anti-Semitic tropes that led to the Holocaust again. So it's this group judgmental. Now, if the Republicans want to be on the moral high ground, if they want to be a human rights party and be on the moral high ground, they cannot get into this anti-Semitic gutter with Democrats or judgmentalism, because anti-Semitism is no different than racism. And my campaign actually has zero tolerance for both racism and anti-Semitism and really all group judgments because of the harm that it does. And so Republicans, if they want to be on the moral high ground, have to stay with our founding values of ethical individualism. And ethical individualism is the idea that we will only judge people based on their unique individuality, and we will consider all people to be equal in value to ourselves. So we are all created equal, therefore we're all equal in value. We're all unique, therefore we cannot be put into groups and we cannot be judged. You can't morally do that.
Right.
Anti-Semitism is immoral, racism is immoral. Any kind of group judgment like that is immoral. So if Republicans want to stay on the high ground, morally speaking, then we have to make sure that we never put people in groups and judge them by group like the Democrats do, because
Right.
this gives us an advantage, in my opinion, over
Yes,
the
it does.
Democrats, because
Yes.
we have the moral high ground and they don't. There's no reason why Republicans should give up the moral high ground and get into the, like I said, the anti-Semitism gutter with the Democrats, because that we lose the moral high ground, and that's one advantage that we have over the Democratic Party, which is exactly why Alan Dershowitz switched from being a lifelong Democrat to becoming a Republican.
And I never thought I would see the day when Dershowitz became a Republican. That was, see, people,
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
and I, we know this because of our age, but people in the 30s probably don't even realize the significance of Alan Dershowitz. Okay. I've been watching this guy for 50 years in the courtroom, and he's now a Republican. Wow. Mind blown,
He said he was a Democrat for then 67 years. So, but that
Wow.
shows you, and of course he's very upfront about this. And Dershowitz is one guy, whether you love him or hate him, but he tells the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
he doesn't lie to people, and he's had a real hard time with the Democrats for a variety of reasons. A lot of it, some of it is based on their Trump hatred, which he thinks is just totally irrational, and it is. And so, to have him join the Republican Party, though, is in my opinion, quite an honor for the Republican Party, because he's an extremely intelligent man, very knowledgeable man, excellent lawyer, and has very good ethics.
Yeah.
I welcome him into the party. We have very good Jewish people in the Republican Party. Dennis Prager, of course.
Right.
Stephen Miller, the main spokesperson attorney for Trump, is Jewish and has done an excellent job with him. And so I really don't want to see Republicans, and it's a very small minority right now, but I hate to see them going down that
I do
path
too. And I think it's unwarranted what
of
they're saying.
dehumanizing Jews or anybody for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really no different than for them to say, well, all black people are stupid, if they were to say something like that, which is racist.
Yeah.
So, you can't say that all Jews control everything and not be anti-Semitic. So it's that kind of hate that we need to stay away from. And the party of hate really is the Democratic Party. It's not the Republican Party. It's the Democratic Party. That's a party of hate. Republicans really should rally around love your neighbor, not hate your neighbor. Love your neighbor, because that's what we're instructed to do. We're instructed to love our neighbors.
And I'll tell you, and someone made a comment earlier about this. What we really need is a smaller government. I love my
Yeah.
neighbors, and I want a smaller government for my neighbors as well. And that's because I love them.
Absolutely. I am strongly in favor of government. The government is way too big. It spends way too much money. And I think we need to have fiscal responsibility. I think we need to downsize the government because, as John Locke said, when John Locke said life, liberty, and the pursuit and private property are the pursuit of happiness, those founding values, he said that government's only job is to protect those values. That's government's only job, to protect those values.
Right.
You don't need a huge government to protect those values.
You really
And
don't.
so we need to downsize the government, and also, of course, that would help us to stop running deficits that are around 38 or 39 trillion dollars right now.
Yeah.
And so, for that reason, we need to do that. But the reason why John Locke said that government should their job is to protect these rights is because, in his opinion, his philosophy, the rights, these kind of rights, are what will create what he referred to as human flourishing.
Yes.
And we've seen that in the United States of America. We have become the most successful nation in world history. And the reason we are that way is because of this idea or these concepts by John Locke and others, where we have these individual rights. We're all created equal. We don't have classes. We don't have hierarchies. We're all created equal to become the most that we can become as a human being, the most productive, the most literate, the most, whatever it is your goal is in life, you get it, you can have it here in the United States, and you can't have it in other countries.
I believe it's John Locke and Adam Smith. You look at all their writings, and nowhere in any of their writings do you see the word capitalism used. Capitalism is a term that was a derogatory term to go against what people saw as a free market, small government endeavor. And so it puts people at a paradigm instead of now being, oh, you're either for no government or you're for a lot of government. It puts people in the paradigm of fascism on the right, socialism on the left. There is nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Milton Friedman wrote about this. In fact, Milton Friedman is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and he wrote a book called Capitalism and Freedom.
Yep.
And they really do go hand in hand together, because capitalism is the economic system that respects individual rights and allows for human flourishing. So capitalism is really based on our founding values.
Right.
It's the economic system that allows us to flourish. Socialism does not. And of course, communism and any of those other kinds of, the National Socialists in Germany, I mean, there's so many failures of socialism as an economic system. But what socialism is all about, really, in very simple terms, and I have an MBA and I have a Master's of Science in Finance. I understand economics, but to simplify it, what socialism is telling everybody is that we want more government involvement in business and in all the different functions, bigger government, more government control, more government involvement. That's what socialism is. Capitalism is limited government, smaller government, less control, and let humans flourish in an economic system that allows them to flourish, and the only one that does is capitalism.
Of course. And that's because
that's what I would do as a U.S. Senate candidate in Congress, and that is to make sure that these founding values that we have that we don't have government policies that become too invasive, that we have government overreach, that we let government step back and let private property and free enterprise and everything else do what it has been doing for the last 250 years in America.
Right. And policy is what it's all about. People will ask me, Rob, why do you do this? And I look at them straight up, and it's policy. and they look at you at policy. I go, yeah, if I'm working to get a candidate elected, if I'm working for an initiative, if I'm working to repeal a bill, it's to change policy. That's what you have in government. That's really all you're working with, is the policy to be able to do this, do that, or not do something. And that's why we need people in there who think like that. And the flowery words and all the speeches don't mean shit until you sit there and see the vote. Kevin G, and I don't want to push this off any further, he had a great question here. He says, if Mr. Russ wants to represent Oregon's Republican Party, has he read the ORP platform? If so, is there any part of it that he disagrees with?
I have read the ORP platform. I haven't memorized it, but I've read it. But there's something I think that we need to add to the Oregon Republican Party platform. In fact, I think we need to add it to the national platform as well. And one of the things that I proposed is this National Human Relations Act. And the National Human Relations Act is the idea that we make sure that no government policy or system is ever designed to judge Americans by group. So not to judge them by skin color, not to judge them by gender, not to judge them by any grouping, not to judge them by their religion, all these other things. And so what it does is it codifies the idea that the founding values. Now, for a long time, I think most people kind of understood that individual rights were important. But with the Democrats introducing collectivism again back into our system and promoting it with DEI programs and those kind of DEI programs would violate the National Human Relations Act. The reason why they would violate that National Human Relations Act is because they treat people as groups, they judge them by groups, and they allocate some money and different resources and government processes to people based on what group that they're in. And this, of course, is un-American and it's collectivist. And so the National Human Relations Act. So on the Oregon Republican platform, what I'd like to see actually is the number one part of the platform. The very first thing at the top of the platform is really the idea of love your neighbor. And what does that love your neighbor mean? It means that we consider every American and every Oregonian to be created equal to be equal in value, not a religious perspective, but a humanistic perspective, that we're all equal in value. But we also recognize that every human being is unique as well, which leads to the idea, or to the axiom really, that no human beings can be put into a group and judged by their group. That is not part of the Oregon Republican platform, but it's something that I think that we should have at the number one, at the very, very top of the Oregon Republican platform. Is this, in a way, it's a celebration of our founding values, and to make sure that Republicans never, ever engage in group judgmentalism against other Americans, like racism or anti-Semitism or all these other things, or being anti-Christian or whatever. Because it's such an important part of what our country is all about.
Right.
It's probably the most critical philosophical concept, and from that philosophical concept flows the success of America. It came from that idea. And that's the other thing about government policies. Government policies should always come from making sure that they don't violate these axioms, these fundamental values of America's foundings. So any government policy that we have, that we build on, should only come from that it doesn't violate these basic values that America was founded on. And socialism, of course, would do that, I think, because it creates bigger government. Bigger government creates less freedom, and less freedom is less human flourishing. So it's those kind of concepts that we need to make sure that government never violates those concepts or ever becomes too powerful to violate those concepts.
And that's exactly what happens in a totalitarian country, right? Yeah, and It's sad that we're living in an age where maybe it's not as sad as I think, because we're now having to re-educate our children on a lot of things that just doesn't seem to be getting across to them, because they don't go to church like they used to. They don't go to school and get taught the things that we're discussing right here today. They don't get taught this stuff. And so it's almost like we have a whole goal. We have no choice. This is a job that's been placed before us, that we now have to teach this generation that why we've done what we've done and how we got to where we're at. And it's not all about white man was bad and everyone else was good,
No. Now, anytime that anybody says white this, black this, brown this, whatever, I always think, you're on the wrong path. You're basically violating Americanism, really, because Americanism is not about groups. It's not about collective identities. It's not about Europe. That's a European thing.
Right.
You go back to European society. European society had all these different hierarchies. Well, we're better at this class and we're better at that class. And even Marxism had the proletariats, and it had the bourgeoisie, and it had the merchant classes and these different classes of people. And of course, it was judged accordingly. I mean, Bernie Sanders came out the other day and said, "Oh, I really don't like rich people or wealthy people." Well, that's a collective judgment against all people who have more money than he does. And, all those kind of things are totally un-American. And academia came up with, and of course, the Ivy Leagues are just as responsible about this. I took some classes at Harvard, but Harvard has regressed in human relations. And in fact, in my opinion, they've lost their Ivy League status simply because they can't even get something as simple as human relations right. Because what they're teaching at Harvard University and Yale and some of these other, Princeton and some of these other schools, they're teaching them that DEI is a reasonable system to have in American society, whereas DEI is really regressive European policies that are being applied to American society. And it harms human relations in America, just like it harmed human relations in Europe. And so what we need to do is make sure that our kids that are being taught in schools need to come back to this idea of really what the success of America was, what I fought for as a U.S. Marine.
Right.
And that was that I would be treated as the unique individual I am. And so I think that's the harm that's being done to a lot of young people, is that they don't really understand why the U.S. has become such a successful country. They don't understand the values that made it such a successful country, and instead they're being taught all kinds of LGBTQ ideas and all these other things, which are grouping people and making judgments about them based on group, which is really in conflict with America's founding values. Why would you teach children that?
Well, we know why. We know why. And
Yeah,
it's the destruction. It's a color revolution that they're trying to play out on our country. They're successful in some areas, not so successful. The problem is that the government, communists, they plan out 10 years in advance, 20 years in advance. Free-loving people, we're not so much. We just want free-loving things happening, but we don't plan out like the communists do. You know what I mean? We're just not, because we're trying to live our life. That's what it's all about, living our life and being with our family and friends. It's not supposed to be about nonstop working for these government issues that I'm working on nonstop. I mean, right now we've got 7 petitions going around. I don't know how many campaigns I'm volunteering for. I want my freaking life back. And if we had less government, I would have my life back. And that's what the kids don't understand. And they don't realize that all this stuff is leading up to more and more control over what they are saying is going to be freedom. Government is just not run right. If we just run it better, we can all be free.
Well, you've got a major political party in the USA that has lost its moral bearings, really. And again, this is why Alan Dershowitz left the Democratic Party and went to the Republican Party, because Republican Party has some problems as well, but it hasn't lost its moral bearings the way that the Democrats have. And really, what we have today is we have to be kind of like Abraham Lincoln all over again, who freed the slaves back in the 1860s. Well, in the 2026 era, what Republicans have to do is we have to free our children and other people who have been taught by the Democrats to see human beings as collectives and judge them by group and assign group rights to people instead of freeing them as unique individual human beings like Abraham Lincoln did. So we need to come back to become the party of Abraham Lincoln. We need to come back to being and celebrating that we are a human rights party and we have a legacy of human rights. And
We sent a lot of young Americans to the South to free a group of people that we are now being called racist against. And
exactly.
yet, and by the way, I've got a picture. I probably don't have it anywhere. I've got a picture of my relatives back as they joined up to fight for the Union. 5 different brothers in my family went to fight for the Union. And when I hear people call me racist or fascist, it's like, are you kidding me? My family sacrificed. You know, it's and a lot of families did to fight for the freedom of someone. These people didn't have to fight in the Civil War to fight for these people's freedom. They could have chose not to fight. And yet they decided that this was such an important principle that every man was created equal. They were willing to go out and fight the Civil War just to have the freedom of a minority that they could have easily just eradicated if they wanted.
It is probably Rob, is probably the most critical American value that we have in this country, that we are all created equal. You know, there were over 600,000 men lost their lives in the Civil War. 600,000. And what the Union was trying to do is, of course, keep the country together. But if you think that the Civil War was all about human rights, which it was, because it was all about slavery, the South wanted to keep slavery and the North wanted to get rid of it. This was an argument from the founding of the country, where the northern states did not want to have slavery, but the southern states did. And so the northern states went along with it to try to kind of create all 13 colonies, which then has expanded. But by 1860, we knew morally that we can't have this kind of a system any longer. It is morally wrong. It is unbiblical. There's a lot of different parts about it that are simply wrong. But so we went through all that, and 600,000 Americans gave their lives to get to the point where, okay, we're now all created equal and we're all unique individuals. And that's what happened after the Civil War. Now the Democrats are bringing us back into that same kind of ideas today, where we're not all unique individuals. And there are some groups that are better than other groups, and some groups that should have more moral authority than other groups. So intersectionality creates this whole hierarchy. You know, if you're a lot of different victim classes, you're up here, or if you're LGBTQ, you're up here, and if you're a so-called white male, you're down here. Well, that's ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous.
Where we all are is right here. We're on a horizontal line of equality for everybody. Nobody above the line, nobody below the line. The German Nazis thought the Aryans were above here, and they thought the Jews were down here. And we see what happens when you do that.
Right.
And that's been throughout human history. So Democrats are totally on the wrong path here, and it's harming the country. It's not helping the country. And the best thing that Republicans can do, if we can keep power in the midterms, and I certainly hope that we can, is to make sure that we keep destroying these DEI programs and all this structure, systematic structure that the Democrats have built that promotes the idea that people are groups and they're not unique individuals.
Yeah, and this is the problem that we're going to be facing, and this is why it's kind of a unique time where we're kind of doing it all over again in this country. Dove Omega has a great comment here, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about and how we kind of maybe lost the country a little bit back in the 60s, especially about 69, when instead of celebrating the first man on the moon, we were celebrating a bunch of dirty hippies at Woodstock. It's strange what this country was doing. But she says this, she says, the LSD wore off after Altamont. The hippies went into the woods, and the weather underground permeated the politics. And I think in many ways that's a great comment. And then she goes on. This is good. You're doing great, Dove. She says, "I am a New York expat. I came to Oregon for the Merry Pranksters, and when I got here, I discovered it was the Insane Clown Posse." You are absolutely correct. Yes.
Well, yeah, and Portland takes the pride that, Portland, I lived in Portland for most of my life. And so I'm pretty familiar with the folks up there. But they take pride in the fact that Portland is weird, right?
Yeah.
But Portland actually is not weird. Portland is really into groupism, where it's really into collectives. And what Portland's gone down the path of being a leftist city. And it has leftist people running the city, and they're all into this collective identity thing. Well, the fact is that everybody is weird. If you interpret weird to be individual, everybody's unique. Everybody's unique. I mean, there's no exact copies of anybody. And when you have that, when you realize that axiom or that fundamental value that everybody is unique, and that's a truth, I think. So you always want to build any kind of human relational philosophy on truth. So the foundation should be truth. Foundation is we're all created equal. Foundation is we're all unique. When you build up from there, you will absolutely not ever get to the point where we should have DEI taught in schools, or that we should have intersectional hierarchies. Again, those are European concepts. Right. Royalty in Europe was a higher level. But in America, they said in the Declaration of Independence, we're all created equal. Well, then America should not have a major political party advocating for Americans being unequal when the Declaration of Independence says we're all created equal. It's a violation of American founding values. In America, my hat, by the way, is the American Legion, and I'm a lifetime American Legion member. And they came out with a new definition the other day of Americanism. And basically, Americanism, the concept of American, you could call it a philosophy if you want to, is this idea that we are not groups, we are individuals, and we have individual rights, and some of those rights are unalienable. So it goes back to this Declaration of Independence. And so I think what the country needs to do, philosophically speaking, when it gets into these kind of high-level discussions about, what kind of philosophy, what kind of political philosophy we should have that drives the country, we need to get back to the founding values and that political philosophy, and make sure that anything that comes after that always connects back to those values. DEI does not connect back to those values. No. Socialism does not connect back to those values. Anti-Semitism does not connect back to those values. And so we need to judge everything that we have going on in the country. And we kind of need to have a revival in the United States of American founding values taught to our children and celebrated everywhere we go.
I was going to get a big tent, and I was going to get Chris Ann Hall. I don't know if you're familiar with Chris Ann Hall. And I was going to get a couple of people like her, and we were going to do a Patriots revival where we'd go around, and she does this great speech from the Magna Carta all the way up to the U.S. Constitution and all the founding documents in between, and lays out the argument of why we are, as far as I'm concerned, the superior quality nation. And that's because we invest in individualism, not collectivism. And it's sad we're so much losing that.
Yeah. And that's why I wrote the book, Rob, because the book is about ethical individualism. And what it does, ethical individualism, I could call it ethical individualism as a philosophy, but also ethical individualism as a theory. So you have critical race theory, right? Which is
Mhm.
CRT. And what I wrote this book for was because it's ethical individualism theory, EIT. And ethical individualism ties directly back to the Declaration of Independence. Critical race theory does not. Critical race theory came from Europe. So yes, we need to kind of relearn the founding values. And Republicans need to do this too, because
Yeah.
Republicans are going astray as well. And the platform should have elements of these founding values in every Republican platform. So we need to go back to this and be able to relearn these founding values, because we're going away from them right now. And the Democratic Party has gone way away from the founding values of the United States.
Doug Farrell says here, he says, I will love to share this episode with high schoolers so they can understand the ways individualism and collectivism and how the concept of America differs and succeeds over all the other systems. DEI is regressive. And that's thank you for the compliment.
DEI is regressive. It is being promoted by progressives,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of those other times where what they stand for is what they say they stand for is the opposite of what it's kind of like Antifa, you know.
Yeah.
Antifa are not really anti-fascists, they're fascists.
They're fascists.
So, but DEI is truly regressive. It is pulling us back to tribalism. It's pulling us back to groupism. It's pulling us back into European feudalism. You know, I mean, you're going backwards in human relations with DEI, not forwards. And if Harvard University teaches DEI, and they do, that shows you that even the Ivy League schools in America have failed.
Yep.
They fail to understand the founding values of the country. And we really have to kind of wonder how that happened. But the other side of that is to take the Ivy Leagues and all other American universities and say, look, you guys need to be re-educated. I'm not talking about re-education camps, but I'm talking about a re-education of the higher learning system. I have four university degrees, so I know what the university system is like. But they need to go back to the fundamentals and get back in line with what the United States political philosophy really is and why it worked.
Well, you know, this is part of the problem with Oregon, and we are the top percentage partner with China. And if you're a partner with China, if we're having that high of exchange, then there is some CCP involvement, because you don't do business in China unless you're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, I forget the time period of how long it was, but over a certain time, they had given $120 million to higher education and K through 12 education to Oregon. And this was recently. And you have to ask yourself, why is China? Because they got a lot of starving kids in China. You know, that's where I told my mother to send the food that I wouldn't eat. Here, send this to the Chinese kids. Well, if they have all those starving people over there, then why are they sending $120 million to Oregon to educate our already privileged kids in college?
Well, China is an adversary, and actually, David Smith and I were at a Pendleton rally, and they had asked about the Oregon-China Council, and they asked about my feelings about China, and basically I got up in front of the group there, and I said, everything we do with China has to be very carefully thought out, because China is an adversary. They're an ally of Russia. They're not an ally of the United States. They're an adversary. They make war on us economically. You know, they steal our technology. These are not people that we should treat lightly. And what we need to make sure we do that anytime we're getting money from China, we have to understand what the reason is for that money and what it is that they're trying to do. And if they're trying to influence American children or our educational system to be more accepting of socialism, communism as an economic system, so that so that the United States aligns more with China. That's very problematic, and we should not allow that to happen, because America is a totally different system. We're a capitalistic system, and we already have enough young people who already want to be anti-capitalist, which to me is crazy. So I think we need to be we need to treat China as an adversary in all things, whether it's donations, whether it's educational exchanges, whether it's even business exchanges and trade relations. We don't want to get too close to China. In fact, I'd like to see us decouple more from China than we have.
I would too. And I seriously think there's a huge problem. And when you have reports coming out from three-lettered alphabet agencies saying that a huge swath of politicians in Canada are bribed and blackmailed by China, and they believe that another huge swath on the West Coast, from Washington all the way down to the Mexican-American border, politicians have been bribed and blackmailed. And then when you've got a gentleman here, Senator David Brock Smith, whose largest contributor, who contributes even in years when he's not running for office, an extraordinary amount of money, you find out he made most of his money in China. And you can't find out the people who've invested with this gentleman because it's a private firm. So my question is who are you working with, Dave?
Yeah. Well, I gave him the nickname of China Dave.
Yeah.
He didn't like that word very much. But I mean, somebody who's that into, I guess he's made a trip to China and different kinds of things. Somebody that's that into trying to connect with China, it's just, from my perspective, I'd rather decouple from China than to try to get more and more connections to China. So,
Dove Omega, the one who was telling us about the LSD in Altamont, she has another really great comment here, and I couldn't agree with her more. We opened the door to China during the Nixon administration. Nixon went to China with good intentions, which he did. I believe that he did. I mean, it's Nixon, but I truly thought capitalism would liberate China from communism, and many of us did think that, but I think we have learned birthday Chinese elite scam does. Ross Perot was right, and Ross Perot was right back in, 92, I think it was.
Yes, yeah, and I do remember people thinking that if we could open our markets with China, that would help free the Chinese people. They'd start demanding democracy, more of a capitalistic system. And China has somewhat of a capitalistic system, which is one of the reasons why it's done better, but in some ways. But their political system is totalitarian. It's one party and totalitarian, and that is totally incompatible with the United States. And when you have trade, this much trade, we're so dependent on China today, and yet China, again, like I said, is an adversary. Why would the United States ever become so dependent on an ally of Russia, with a system which is incompatible with democracy and capitalism, And I understand that the labor was cheaper over there, and so you can get things made for cheaper. Quality of products coming from China is really bad because they're a totalitarian system and they don't have motivated workers. But it is cheaper, but that doesn't mean it's good for America. I'd rather pay more money for a more high quality product made in America than to buy something in China.
And I think that what we lose, we pay for later on anyway. And once again, a lot of our children are losing the value of a hard day's work. Just that simple act of going out every day and doing a job. I see these people on the streets nonstop, and Obama had the housing first policy. You know, we give them a house, and I always look, why would you give anyone who's already destroyed everything they had more property? That it's just ludicrous. And yet these people, if they just were given, if they were just, I don't know, I think we're going to have to find ways of dealing with and I don't like calling them homeless. They're street criminals, many of them. They're drug-addled, mentally ill people. And I think we're going to have to get tough and build some prisons and put some people away in some mental institutions. And I think there's justification for it because there are children and women and others being hurt on the street by these people, not to mention the property damage.
Yes, and I think that with the homeless problem, to me, is a national crisis, not just an Oregon state or even a city crisis. And so I think there should be more federal funds available for helping states and cities to be able to produce veterans should not be homeless on the streets, but really nobody should be homeless on the street. It's
Right.
one of the necessities of human life: food, clothing, and shelter. You have to have shelter. And so the United States is an affluent enough country that we can afford to provide the most primitive kinds of shelter for people who absolutely need it. And this should be done for American citizens. It should not be done for people who are here illegally.
Right.
But for the other part that you talked about was the idea of mental health. We need to put a lot more money into mental health issues. There used to be a time when people it was easier to institutionalize somebody, and then they made laws that changed all that, but they went too far the other direction. I think we need to make it easier to institutionalize people. I see people on the streets here in Grants Pass and other kinds of places that should not be out on the streets. They're
Right.
just not capable.
No.
And I think it's very harmful for them to be out on the streets. And so, I mean, they're going to die out. They're going to die on the streets because they just don't have the mental capacity to be able to take care of themselves. And I've seen this happen even in my own family. I had a family member who was struggling and on the streets, and I was trying to get them institutional help. And they said, oh, no, as long as they're not a harm to themselves or others, we're not going to do anything for them. Well, no, I think we need to intervene into those kinds of situations. So get them into an institution if that's where they need to be. So I think we need to relax some of those ideas that, we're not going to institutionalize somebody only because they're a harm to themselves or others, because eventually they are always a harm to themselves anyway, because they can't
Right.
take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And then drug treatment, of course, is also something that needs to be enhanced. We need more money for it, and we need to help people to get off drugs. So a lot of the so-called homeless are also drug addicts or people that are addicted to drugs. And one of the reasons why they can't get a job and can't do anything because they're addicted to drugs.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's a very sad situation. It's a multifaceted situation. It does, Dove, who I guess Dove is Dave in Hebrew, so this is kind of interesting. But Dove says, I'll actually pose a question for Russ. What will we do with mail-in ballots?
well, in Oregon, we don't have any choice right now until things are changed. But at the federal level, what I'd like to see, again, federal law supersedes state law. I'd like to be able to see the federal laws, if we can, get to the point of being able to make sure that states improve their voting systems to make them more accurate. We need to get rid of mail-in voting. We need to have either in-person voting or some kind of a system that we can track
Yeah.
where every vote comes from. Because if banks can keep track of every dollar you have and make sure that only you have access to that dollar with the computing power that they
Right.
have, then the federal government should be able to track every vote, every legitimate voter who's a U.S. citizen, who's still alive, by the way.
Yes.
And they should be able to track those people, and they don't have to understand how they voted, but they should make sure that they can have that ballot be tracked to a U.S. citizen who is voting and
Yeah.
who's alive,
Yeah, something.
and so that so that we don't have these problems with with votes that we don't know where they're coming from. And the Democrats all say, well, there's hardly any of that kind of fraud. They don't really know, because the chain of custody for ballots is so loose that they don't really know whether or not. I mean, if somebody obviously somehow got tied in to voting fraudulently, that's one thing, but they don't know. There could be thousands of bad people voting fraudulently that they can't prosecute because the chain of custody, they don't know how to handle the chain of custody. So I think I'm in favor of the SAVE Act. I'm in favor of doing anything that we can to make sure that the voting in the country, which I think is extremely critical. I mean, we spend trillions of dollars every year, and those trillions of dollars, where that money goes is dependent by the politicians that we put into office. And we should make sure the politicians that we put into office are being put there by American citizens only.
Yeah.
And there's just no reason why we can't do that.
Oh, no reason. Yeah. We, like you said, we exchange Bitcoin, millions and millions of trades every day with Bitcoins down to the 100th of the cent. You can't tell me there isn't a process we can put in place to make sure that whoever should be voting is voting. And
absolutely. Yeah.
We're working on that here. We're really pushing.
It takes willpower.
Yeah.
And the Democrats don't have it, but I'm hoping the Republicans do.
So I want to show this because I want to get you out of here. You've been on here you've been on here for an hour and 40 minutes. I've enjoyed this conversation that much. And
it's been fun though. I've enjoyed it. So covered a lot of ground.
And I think other people have as well. I think this is something that was just educational, as well as something for the campaign. But here's a picture that I've got to put up.
Yeah, one of my favorite.
Your opponents couldn't do that. See, you can do that as a Marine. You look at you look like a physically fit person, and you're a Marine, and you couldn't see DBS or Joe Ray doing something like this. This is really unique. So I give you props for this, man.
Yeah, that is sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words. Yeah. And so if you're going to put something out there for people on Facebook who are scaling down their walls or whatever, something like a picture like that is pretty impactful. And by looking at it, I'm the only veteran running, so I'm the only one. Smith can't do it, and Perkins can't do it, but I'm the only one running that can have a Marine fighting fighting Merkley. But that fight is symbolic too, from the perspective that I will use my military experience to connect with a lot of other voters who have gone through what I've gone through, or have family members who have gone through what I've gone through, to really go after somebody like Merkley with his rainbow tattoo. Yeah. And the rainbow tattoo is the idea that Merkley elevates certain groups of people above others with his support of DEI, so that the LGBTQ group gets elevated above just, for instance, plain white males, for example.
Right. Dub says, I was just a Cab Scout grunt in the Army. Damn. It says, if at all, if I don't have deep respect for Marines, hoorah!
Hoorah! Yes, definitely. And I have respect for the Army as well, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I think
both
there's a lot of good veterans out there who who would like to see another veteran in the United States Senate. I think we need more veterans in the U.S. Senate, particularly when we get into all these different military issues and things. A veteran understands what it means to put boots on the ground. Merkley has no idea. David Smith has no idea. Joe Ray Perkins has no idea, but a veteran does. And I think we need more veterans in Congress. We need more veterans in the United States Senate.
I would agree with you. I think there's plenty of room for them, and you share all the things we talked about, a unique perspective that, well, college kids today just don't have. So not to knock out college kids. Once again, I'm not putting them in the group because there's a lot of good college kids out there I work with that
There
are
are.
great people and have their heads on straight. And it's funny, they said the whole time they went through college, they had to pretend they had two different lives. The life that they had at college where they had to be one person and the real life they lived outside of college world. And I find that to be very sad, but I'm not hearing that now from high schoolers who are telling me that they have to pretend to be someone else at high school when there's something completely different at home. And Christian kids, I've talked to at least a dozen who have explained that to me. Weird.
Yeah, and that's one of the impacts of DEI and that kind of collectivism type thought, both in academia, both at the lower grade levels as well as the higher grade levels, is that you have this groupism that takes place in it can be an ideological groupism where you're going to have leftists versus people on the right. And in academia, you have quite a bit of leftism versus conservatism. And this has been going on for a long, long time. But even the book that was written about Harvard Law, where a conservative law student would say something and he would be hissed at by the leftist type
Yeah.
other people. And of course, the lawyers in the law has become very much leftist as well. So I think we need to, and it shows that students are not being treated equally. They're not being respected equally in their classrooms. And that's why they feel like they have to put on this appearance of being one thing and they could be something else when they leave the classroom. That is symptomatic of the problems of groupism and DEI and collectivism.
Yeah.
But it also shows you what the Democrats are doing, even in the classrooms. And so these poor students really are being not given a balanced education. They're not being treated equally. And so we're ending up with a lot of students who automatically adopt the leftist position without having really thought about it, because they've never even heard the other side of the issue. And that's wrong, of course. And that's not even really an education. That's an indoctrination. But
right. And that's the problem with our schools. I got to get you going. What would you like to say to the listeners before you get out of here?
Well, I'd like to say that that remind them that, again, the Republican primary in May is really about picking the best person, the best Republican who actually has a chance of defeating Jeff Merkley in November. And having listened to the people, there's really only two other people who are running against me in the U.S. Senate that has any kind of a chance. David Smith and Joe Ray Perkins, having listened to them, gone to candidate forums with them. In my opinion, Joe Ray Perkins has proven that she can't beat David Merkley in November. She's done that twice now at the U.S. Senate level. It's not going to change this year. David Smith is not ready for the U.S. Senate level, and his argument that he's an experienced legislator is not going to work with Merkley. He's going to be defeated by Merkley. So Republicans should at least consider the fact that here's a chance for you to send somebody to the elections in November that is unique as a candidate, and that the uniqueness starts with the fact that I'm a veteran and Merkley is not. So I'm going to have the edge on Merkley with the veteran vote. I won't get all of them, but I'll get most of them. And the fact that I have real business experience starting from the ground up that Merkley has not had and doesn't have that kind of life experience, and that I'm more educated than Merkley is, and I have that advantage over Merkley. And so there's, in my opinion, I'm also a more honest person than Merkley, because Merkley was lying to us about voting to keep the government shut down and then blaming it on the Republicans. So there's been several different lies, and his idea of calling ICE officers all fascists, I mean, some of those kind of things are just really problems. So from an ethical perspective, I also think I'm a more ethical candidate than Merkley is. So I think if you consider those qualities that you've got a candidate here this year in 2026 that really does have the chance and the opportunity, and I will beat Jeff Merkley in November if I'm given the chance to do that.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I really have enjoyed this conversation. This has been very enlightening. I'd like to have you back on some other time, maybe talk about other
Oh,
stuff.
sure. Yeah.
You're very well, you're an intelligent person. I enjoy speaking with you. And I want to thank you for coming on, Russ. I appreciate it. And good
Well,
luck.
thanks for having me,
in the
Rob.
US Senate. Anytime, anytime. Well, you take care. Okay, sir?
Okay, we'll do it again.
All right.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. And that was Russ McAlmond. I would ask that if you're going to make a vote, consider Russ. I haven't made my decision yet, but I think I'm really now starting to lean towards Russ. I'm good friends with Joe Ray Perkins, but Russ is someone who I think is needed right now. I think he is really needed, and I think we need to start looking at these candidates. Let's see. Stock Farms family, you say private schools are far ahead of public schools. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And even back in the day, we knew this. All my cousins who went to Catholic private school were always better educated than the rest of us who went to private school. Very much so. Very much so. Stocks Family Farm also says, great interview, Russ. Very well spoken. He is very well spoken, and it's great to be able to bring these candidates on who are willing to come on, because there are some people who are just too afraid. They don't want to answer any questions, or they don't want to be exposed for who they really are. And so there are certain candidates who I know will not come on this show, and but they have an open invitation. Anyone who is a candidate out there, and I don't have to be the one to invite them. If you want to see a candidate on this show, you want to hear about them, send them an email and say, hey, Rob Taylor is offering you time on the air. Just let them know. I'm more than happy to have whoever wants to be on the show to come on the show. And that kind of leads me to my next comment from Dove Omega. Thank you so much, Russ. I'll be watching you, brother. Rob, you are doing a great job giving us some local voices. Love it. And I love doing this. This is what I enjoy. I enjoy coming out here and being able to present these people to you, because there's not a lot of spaces that you'll get to see people like Russ. And especially in a long format. How many times do you see people sit down for 2 hours to have a conversation? And you notice that it wasn't a back and forth where I was just asking questions and he was just giving out answers. We were having a legitimate conversation. So you get to know the real person. You get to know who Russ was. I enjoy all those types of conversations most of the time. There are some people you talk with where you just go, oh my gosh, this interview is going nowhere. Not with Russ. Very exciting, very good stuff. And so I recommend, if you're looking for somebody to vote for, Russ McAlmond running against, in the primary, he's going to be running against Merkley in the general. So please think and consider Russ. We didn't get to play any 3H tree service today. That's okay. You know, before I get to my sponsors, let me talk about something real quick that I have to address. We have a candidate for clerk, really good candidate. He's a friend of mine, so maybe I'm biased, but his name is Marty Kurt. Let me see if I got his poster up here. Oh, there we go. And Marty was running, and so was another lady by the name of Pam Lewis, and they're running against Julie Brecky, who's the current clerk. And we just found out that Pam was on probation for some problems that she had as a nurse, giving out the wrong medication and several other different things that were put on the list. I really don't want to get into it. It's not important. But the thing was, I was a little disappointed in Pam for the fact that anyone who's on probation for the job that you're doing shouldn't be going out and trying to get another job and trying to become clerk and thinking that that is not going to come up somewhere on social media is ludicrous. Well, from what I understand, Pam Lewis has sent the Republican Party notice that she is no longer in the race, that she is bowing out. I've heard that she's supposed to contact the Secretary of State and withdraw from the race, but officially, I don't know if you can. I think the deadline has passed, so she's going to be on the ballot because they've probably already been printed. They're going to be coming out here real soon. So I'm asking all of you, to not vote for Julie Brecky, who is the Democrat, and not to vote for Pam Lewis because she has some personal issues she has to deal with. I'm asking you to please vote for Kurt for clerk. I totally endorse him. I think he's a great guy, and he's running on two things that he wants to do. And this is what's great about people who are focused. He understands the problem with the clerk's office, and he's going to get in there, and he's got two things that he's going to work on. Number one, he's going to work on voter roll. He's going to work on cleaning the voter roll. Boy, I don't know. Boy, sometimes you just have a brain fart and it just doesn't come out, does it? Yeah, he's working on cleaning the voter roll. He believes that the county clerk should be more active, proactive in making sure that the voter rolls are clean and that people who shouldn't be voting and aren't receiving ballots. The second thing he's going to do, and this is really a good idea, he's trying to be more transparent, the most transparent clerk ever. See, Marty Kurt is part of the election integrity group here in Coos County. And we, as a group, have asked for public records from the county clerk, which she has to provide those public records, but she can add a cost to it. And the cost is so exorbitant that we can't afford it in most cases, unless we go to court, but then you got to pay for it to go into court. And so it's very difficult to get a lot of this information that we should be able to have available to us right at our fingertips. So Marty is going to make sure that they are at our fingertips by putting it on the internet. All of the information that we've been asking for from the clerk, like the images of the ballots, the adjudicated ballots, all those types of reports that you don't see because the clerk, well, she can provide them for you, but she's going to charge you for it. All of that should be provided free. People have a right to know this stuff. And if he puts it on the website, the county website, then we all get to see what's going on in the clerk's office. So that's two different things: cleaning the voter roll and transparency. I'm voting for Marty Kurt because Marty Kurt deserves to be clerk. He is smart enough to do the job beyond the qualifications of the people who are there now. So I'm hoping that you're looking into this. Let's see, I got a comment here. Half of the Brandy signs I put up have been taken down, but John Sweet signs are still up. Suspicious. No, it's not suspicious at all. You will find that there's a group of conservatives out there who think that they have more privilege, that they are special. They're probably the Republicans who suffer affluenza. You know the Republicans who are too good for Republicans, those blue-collar Republicans like, you and me, TJ. That's right. Those Republicans are probably, they're probably out there. They don't think that Brandy Martindale probably has a right to run because their anointed one, John Sweet, he's the giver of the bird. If you know John Sweet, you know what I mean. And so John Sweet, the giver of the bird, well, he's the anointed one by some of these established Republicans here in the county. And what can I say? Most of them are dirtbags. And what do you expect from a guy? Here it is. Here he is. Here is John Sweet. This is what John Sweet thinks of the voters. This is what he did to one of his constituents who went to give a public comment at a commissioner's meeting. John Sweet thought he'd flip him off because he didn't like him. He got censured for that. Is this the politician you want running for your office? It's your office. We all own the county commissioner's position. It's the people's position. Don't let this old bastard on the screen there. Don't let him fool you. He's a Republican. He's not a very good person. He gave money to a bunch of pedos. He's voted for every tax increase and fee increase out there. He's closed off public lands to the people of this county. This is not a good man, not a good man. And he's voted against your Second Amendment rights. This guy twice voted against your Second Amendment rights. And then what does he do? He gives you the bird. Yes, John Sweet, the giver of the bird. This is what he thinks of you folks. And if you're stupid enough, like those affluential some people suffering from affluenza, those type of Republicans. If you're one of those Republicans, then you're the ones who deserve the bird. So this just ticks me off. This is John Sweet. This is why a lot of us Republicans are damn happy. You'll hear this from a lot of Republicans in Coos County. We're all excited for what's happening here, and we've liberated the party. The party was kidnapped and being held by people who were allies of David Brock Smith, and David Brock Smith didn't want any more people in the party because he knew most of us thought David Brock Smith was a dirtbag, and that's because, well, he is, and so therefore he doesn't want the party being full of people who are going to call him out, and that's why he was keeping a leash on the Coos County chair, Michael Brainerd. We got rid of the chair. The chair's gone. Yep, the chair's gone, and we got all his stuff. We got all the chair's stuff. Yep, we got our social media back. So screw you, Michael Brainerd, and screw you, David Brock Smith. You're not going to hold the Coos County Republican Party captive anymore, because why? We've liberated it. We have liberated the party, and let me tell you, we've got big plans. So I hope you all are watching, and I hope you join in, because this is going to be fun. We're asking people to become PCP members. If you are out there and you want to become a PCP member, this is the time to do it. Sign up at the clerk's office and find out what's going on. And now, without any further delay, I can get back to my sponsors. Let's see, 3H Tree Service. Like I was saying earlier, we didn't get to play Where's 3H Tree Service, but they are fine sponsors of mine. And if you need some tree service in your yard, I know I just got a couple of trees taken out here in the backyard. My neighbor did. And I'll tell you what, it's an incredible thing to have somebody come in and take out those trees and bring in a whole bunch of sunlight. That's what I got now. If it looks a little brighter in the studio, that's because they've cut down those 60-foot trees on the side of the house there. And so 3H Tree Service can do that for you. They can come in and they can surgically remove those trees, leave you a beautiful view, and you won't even know they were there. That's how clean they are. That's how reputable they are. 3H Tree Service, 541-294-1800. Once again, 541-294-1800. 3H Tree Service. They are licensed 100237. I'm not sure if I even have to say that. It's in the picture, right? Well, it don't matter. And by the way, Matt Holman is a licensed arborist. Yeah. And so if you're someone who's concerned about those types of things, which you should be, because you're getting those trees removed, well, you need to call 3H Tree Service, 541-294-1800. And of course, Tom and Giggs. I need to get over and see Tim and Shanna. I haven't seen them in a while. I need to see how they've been doing. They're over there at Tom and Giggs in the Empire neighborhood on Shoneman Street, 135 South Shoneman Street, right behind the car wash. If you know where the Empire neighborhood is, you know where the car wash is. It's right next to 7-Eleven. And then right behind it, you have Tom and Giggs. And Tom and Giggs, they can take care of a lot of different things for you. They can take care of lift kits, performance accessories. You need to have your alignment done, go to Tom and Giggs. And you know what's really cool about this is, do you know if your car is travel worthy? I don't know if my car is travel worthy, and I travel a lot. So what you do is you call up Tom and Giggs and you ask them, hey, I need you to check out my car and see if it's travel worthy, and they'll take care of that problem for you. You just got to make an appointment, and then you'll find out, is your car travel worthy? I think you want to know. Tom and Giggs can tell you. And they're not just an automotive store. They've got a lot of cool accessories. Look at this. They got this really cool drone. They got a lot of RC cars. In fact, they're the largest RC dealership on the South Coast. Really good people out here. Look at this boat. This is really cool. Wouldn't that be fun to have out here? Yeah, that would be great. You got hero copters of all sizes and shapes. Yep, very good stuff. You got planes. We even got planes. That's very cool. And more RC cars, those remote control cars. Very cool stuff. And remember, you can also get your Tannerite there, but your Tannerite, you got to be 18 years or older to get your Tannerite. And yes, they'll ask you for an ID. Let's see. My next sponsor is Herbal Choices. Herbal Choices, the marijuana dispensary of my choice. And by the way, if you're under 21, you shouldn't be smoking pot in the first place. That's no. You shouldn't be doing that. But if you're under 21, they won't even let you in the place. So you have to be 21 years or older to be in there, and you should be 21 years or older. I mean, that's your 20s are when you do this kind of stuff. Well, maybe not, because I'm in my 60s. But Herbal Choices, they are having several sales go on. I believe Mother's Day is going on, and I believe their elevated products are now on sale. And you can find out more at herbalchoices.com. Herbalchoices.com is their website. You must be 21 years or older. You do not give this substance to children. Do not operate heavy machinery, and do not drive while under the influence of marijuana. You don't want to do that. Bad stuff. I'm an advocate. If you want to use it, you got to go home and use it. You got to go home and use it at your own place, and you can't be out driving or using heavy equipment, and never give it to children. That's just a rule of mine. And they do have 5 convenient locations: Charleston, Coos Bay, Bandon, Reedsport, and North Bend. All of those places you can go to get all your cannabis needs at Herbal Choices. And folks, you don't have to do anything. You really don't. And I tell this to a lot of people, out there. There's a lot of young women, even some young men, who are being pressured into having sex or doing drugs or taking part in activities that they don't want to be. Guess what? You don't have to. You can abstain. And I've got this new product. It's called abstinence. You send me some money, I don't care how much, and I'll send you an empty envelope with the word abstinence on it. And all you have to do is just abstain from all those horrible things that is bringing your life down. Can you imagine that? Abstinence. Yeah, it's kind of a holdover from the Reagan administration. Remember, just say no. Well, just say no just wasn't good enough. So I think we should talk about abstaining and why abstaining is good. So abstinence. I've got it on the shelf here. We got plenty of it. Just give me a call. I'll send you an empty envelope full of abstinence. That's right, because you don't have to do it. Let's see. Oregon Firearms Federation. Yeah, they just endorsed Ed Deal for governor. And, I was talking to Kevin about that. We both think that of all the governor candidates, and I like a lot of them, I think that Danielle Bethel is probably, to me, the best governor's candidate. She should be the choice. And she looks good in the Wonder Woman outfit. Yes, I mean, I know that's AI generated, but she pulls it off quite well. I think she does that. So I'd prefer, that Danielle Bethel over Ed Deal. But if I have to choose from the 3 top ones, and the 3 top ones are the 3 Ds, you got Drazen, you got Dudley, and you got Deal. Well, I'm going to go for the real deal. And so I agreed totally with Kevin on promoting that. Off has to be in the fight. And the fight for the primary is, once again, to get the candidate that you think is going to win that fight. And of who is that going to be? I think it's going to be Ed Deal. And part of that is because we have some of his petitions down at the Republican headquarters. So he is doing something more than your average legislature out there. But Oregon Firearms Federation, Kevin Sterrett has been kicking ass for, over 30 years. And he, as the Oregon Firearms Federation, I'm sure he was kicking ass before he was part of the Oregon Firearms Federation. Kevin Sterrett's just a natural ass kicker. That's all I got to say. So he's still kicking ass with the Oregon Firearms Federation. He's fighting for your Second Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights. And if you want to find out more, and I recommend you get on their newsletter, go to OregonFirearms.org and sign up. The guy is very intuitive of what's going on in Oregon politics. He is absolutely got his finger on the pulse of Oregon politics. He knows what's going on out there. Very great guy. I recommend that if you want to give to anyone, any group that's actually doing stuff here in Oregon, who have spent millions of dollars fighting for our Second Amendment right, Oregon Firearm Federation is the place to go. And of course, they're not my sponsors, but I got to talk about them, because if you own a gun, you should sure as hell know how to use it, right? go to the Bandon Gun Club if you live here in Bandon. You don't even have to live in Bandon. All you have to do is become a member at the bandongunclub.org. Go to their website, become a member, and you can go to their 5-trap shoot stand, where they've got 5 different stands that shoot that throw trap, and then you got to shoot it. 5 of them suckers, and it's like they're coming out from all these different directions. And it's really cool because it's not like a video game. You're actually firing live ammo. So if you live in Bandon, this is a really cool club. I got to go see these guys this summer. I didn't get to see them last summer. I was too busy. Didn't get a lot of time to do the gun stuff. But also Taiga Sports Park Association. They're the ones who run the large rifle range for the county, the premier sports shooting and firearms training park. You can find out more at tigersportspark.org. And of course, Coos County Neighborhood Watch. You want to find out what the criminals are doing, because they're doing a lot. I don't even know what they're doing, but I'm willing to bet if you went to Coos County Neighborhood Watch right now, if you went there right now, you would find out there's somebody committing a crime probably in your neighborhood. And that's why it'd be cool if all of you would join this group and become Neighborhood Watch people. And it doesn't take much. I mean, sometimes all you have to do is walk out to the end of your driveway and look around. You might actually have to pick up the phone, because as a Neighborhood Watch person, you've only got one job: observe and report. You observe what's going on in your neighborhood, and then you report it. And you call the cops up and you say, hey. And then you yell at the neighbor across the street and said, hey, I just called the cops on this homeless guy. Would you call the cops too? Because if we get a couple of neighbors to call, it's amazing how the cops respond, because, we're taxpayers. Kind of crazy that way. So Coos County Neighborhood Watch, you can find a whole bunch of allies there. Good group of people. And of course, Coos County Citizen Council, that's Chris Castleman's group, every Wednesday on the Coos County Citizen Watch. You can catch Perry, you can catch Brandy Martindale. A lot of good stuff is going on there. Very, very good stuff. And that was pretty much all I had to talk about. Let me see if I can I saw a couple of comments I want to get to, because it's hard to read the comments. Let's see, going back to Steve Nye, we were talking about John Sweet. He says, and he is 84 with cancer. I know. This is why you can't vote for John Sweet. John Sweet is trying to fool you people and thinking that he's going to be living or being able to work throughout this whole term, these 4 years that he's got coming up. He's already been in office, 16 years? And the county has only gotten worse in every demographic on the chart. So I don't know why anyone would reelect John Sweet, but the guy is 84 with cancer. And if he wins, the 2 leftist politicians, if Rick Coleman doesn't win, if we have 2 leftist politicians in that office, which could happen in this next election, they're going to get to pick the next commissioners. I think John Sweet knows this. I think John Sweet plans on leaving the office in midterms just for the fact that he wants Osborne and Farmer to pick the next commissioner. Why? Because he's one of those affluent Republicans, one of those white collar, never get your hand dirty Republicans. He's one of those Republicans. And he's one of the establishment critters. And so he thinks that he knows best. So he's going to have his 2 leftist buddies, who are potentially going to be on the commission at that time, appoint the new commissioner once he leaves. So if you think it's a good idea to vote for an 84-year-old man with cancer, I think I got a bridge to sell to you. So give me a call. I got a bridge to sell. Doug Farrell says, John Sweet is the Birdman of Coos County. He is the Birdman of Coos County. And Dub says, hooah, hooah. I can't do it right. My throat's, I've been talking too long. I can't do the hoorah. And let's see. Kevin G says, did Russ say that Joe Ray Perkins can't be David Merkley? Wow. That interview was way too much stream of consciousness on just Russ' single topic of human rights of a U.S. Senate candidate. Did you mean to run out the clock or other more important topics? Was open-minded about him and listened intently, but what I witnessed was a heavily disabled, medicated veteran whose heart is in the right place, but he wasn't on his toes enough with a fire in his belly like Joe Ray Perkins to represent Oregon. Yeah. Wow, we must have watched two different interviews. I was in the interview, and no, I thought we handled a lot of different issues. Maybe you didn't see the whole show, Kevin, but then again, you're the guy who used to support Paul Romero. He's a loser on a whole ultra level. Okay? I really don't think I'm going to take too much political advice, Kevin, from a guy who supports Paul Romero. Okay? I just don't think that you're someone who's even credible enough to be giving out advice. But okay, Kevin, I'll we'll take it. Oh, by the way, this is his comment. I didn't even have it up there. Yeah, I think a medicated veteran. Wow. I didn't think he was medicated. Kevin, you're just an asshole. You're just a real asshole, man. Sorry. Yeah, not sorry. Geez, a medicated veteran. I think you're medicated, Kevin. Wow, go smoke some more Paul Romero joints there and tell us where you're at. Geez, what two losers in a pod there. All right, I've had enough of that. I'll see you all next week. We'll be doing all kinds of things coming up. I've got a Friday night rant, and it should be a really cool Friday night rant. We're going to get hopefully some people, statewide candidates on here to do the Friday night rant. That would be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? Because last Friday night we had Marty on and we had Pam Lewis on. But like I said, I'm friends with both of them. And when you got two politicians running together and you're friends with both of them, it makes a really odd show. It was just odd. I couldn't really go after them, or at least Pam, the way I wanted to. Marty, I didn't have a problem with, but Pam with that whole probation thing was just a little weird. So we'll see. We'll see. All right, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Tune in next time. It should be a blast. And until next time, you know what I always say? Carry on, Coos County. Carry on.